Hello, Muslim friends in the world. No one could have predicted that morning would be the last morning for thousands of Israeli soldiers. The sky above Tel Aviv looked calm, even almost beautiful. The morning air was cool. The sunlight had just begun to lift the dark shadows of the night. And across the city, people were starting to breathe easier after hearing news of the ceasefire agreed upon between Israel and Gaza. The world briefly dared to hope. Perhaps this was a sign of the end of the conflict that had been setting the region ablaze for weeks. But that hope vanished in an instant. At 5:43 a.m., the earth shook. A colossal explosion shattered the silence, jolting millions of Tel Aviv residents awake, only to be seized by terror. Flames lit up the sky, followed by a thunderous roar that sounded like the wailing of demons from the depths of the earth. In seconds, the blue sky was consumed by thick black smoke. The center of the explosion, Israel's Southern Command headquarters, the heart of the nation's military power. Within seconds, 1,500 Israeli soldiers were killed instantly. The wreckage of military vehicles lay scattered, buildings reduced to dust, and lifeless bodies strewn in chaos. The surviving soldiers could only stand frozen, some screaming hysterically, others paralyzed in incomprehensible horror. Meanwhile, warning alarms wailed without end. Military radio channels were filled with panicked voices. The headquarters is destroyed. We're under attack. We need immediate assistance. But help never came because no one was prepared for this. This was no ordinary attack. This was a devastating blow crafted with heavenly precision and hellish destruction. High-precision missiles, Iran's secret weapons, pierced through Israel's defense systems like needles through paper. No Iron Dome, no warning, only death, arriving without mercy. The international media was shaken. Within less than 15 minutes after the attack, words like apocalypse, Israel's greatest tragedy, and bloody retaliation flooded news channels around the globe. Yet behind the destruction, one burning question lingered in the air. Who started this? And who will stop it? Shards of glass were still falling. Black smoke billowed high, covering the morning sun that was supposed to shine over Tel Aviv. Amid the ruins of the now devastated military headquarters, only faint cries and sobs could be heard. But far from the chaos, in a place unreachable by Israeli radars and satellites, an underground control room in Tehran had suddenly become the center of the world's attention. It was there that the death button was pressed. Iran, the country long labeled as Israel's eternal enemy, finally bared its fangs in an unexpected way, not through mass assaults, nor through proxies, but with high-precision missiles capable of breaching even the most advanced layered defense systems like the Iron Dome. The name of the missile was Zulfikar II, a new generation weapon whose existence had remained virtually unknown to the outside world until now. Designed to penetrate the most sophisticated electronic and defense systems, this missile is believed to have an independent navigation system and an explosive force powerful enough to obliterate even underground facilities. But the most terrifying aspect was not its technology, it was the message it delivered. The Iranian government did not deny it. In a live broadcast delivered by the spokesman of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the world heard words that sent shivers down its spine. We are not a nation that strikes without reason. But if our honor and our brothers are trampled upon, then our hands will not tremble. This attack is retaliation, a just retaliation. Moments after the statement, the world shook. The Tel Aviv stock market collapsed. The Israeli currency plummeted. Global news agencies raced to break the story. Iran attacks Israel. 1,500 dead in precision missile strike. Ceasefire shattered. Middle East crisis erupts. Yet behind all the chaos, a bigger question began to surface. What exactly drove Iran to take such a massive step? Leaks from intelligence agencies began to emerge. One name, one word, one location that could not be ignored kept being mentioned: Gaza. Behind the deadly strike that obliterated the heart of Israel's military, a dark secret slowly began to surface. The world, initially baffled in its search for answers to Iran's drastic action, finally discovered the spark that ignited this explosion. It all began with a secret Israeli operation in the Gaza Strip. 3 days before Iran's missiles were launched, Israeli Special Forces, an elite unit known as Sayeret Matkal, carried out a covert mission in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza. Officially, the operation was claimed to be a security enforcement action against militant networks, but the reality was far darker. The target of the operation was not a military figure, but a prominent Palestinian civilian known locally as a peace advocate. Ironically, in the assault, conducted without witnesses and without any public confirmation, 8 unarmed civilians, including 2 young children, were killed on the spot. Israel never announced the success or failure of the mission. No media coverage, no warnings. Everything was silenced, as if it had never happened. But Gaza spoke. Photos of the victims spread across Middle Eastern social media, eventually reaching the eyes and ears of Tehran. And at that moment, the red line was crossed. For Iran, this silent massacre was not just a violation of the ceasefire, but an open insult to the dignity of the Islamic world, especially since it took place at a time when peaceful diplomacy was being pursued, when the world hoped Gaza and Israel could finally lay down their weapons. Iran responded not with words, not with diplomatic protests, but with fire and steel. A senior Iranian official, speaking on condition of anonymity, was quoted as saying, "If the blood of Palestinian children stains the earth, then the blood of their soldiers will follow. This is not war, this is a warning." Meanwhile, within Israel itself, rumors began to swirl. The people were asking, is this truly the result of our own mistake? Did the government deliberately cover up that dark mission for political reasons? Those questions echoed through the streets of Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem, slowly eroding public trust in the government amidst the unfolding disaster. That morning, Tel Aviv witnessed not only physical destruction but also the collapse of the soul of a nation. The Iranian missile strike did not just obliterate Israel's Southern Command headquarters. It shattered the country's confidence and the symbol of strength it had long prided itself on. In less than a minute, 1,500 Israeli soldiers, trained, elite, and combat-ready, were killed instantly without firing a single shot. Fires still raged through the remnants of the buildings. Thick black smoke rolled high into the sky, as if to announce to the world that something irreversible had taken place. From above, the area that was once the nerve center of Israel's most advanced military operations now resembled a mass grave. Dozens of melted combat vehicles, burning tanks, and the remains of soldiers' bodies scattered among twisted, shattered metal. Rescue teams fought to break through the rubble. Everywhere were screams, sobs, and the faint voices of those buried alive. Some called out the names of loved ones. Others simply stared blankly, their eyes devoid of life. "This headquarters is gone," whispered a young officer in a hoarse voice, his face smeared with dust and blood. His eyes stared at the devastation, unable to comprehend the reality before him. Israel's national television broadcast blurred images from the scene. The anchor's voice trembled as the death toll kept climbing. The government was utterly unprepared for destruction of this scale. No emergency plan was sufficient to handle the total annihilation of a military base of such importance. Meanwhile, social media exploded. Photos and amateur videos spread across the globe, not just showing the devastation, but also the faces of the Israeli people. Terrified, furious, and psychologically shattered. Even within the country, disappointment and distrust began to grow. Many started asking, where was the Iron Dome? How could the enemy penetrate the very heart of military power? Was the government covering up a colossal failure? At the same time, 1,500 families across Israel received the news that would change their lives forever. The homes of soldiers' families were now filled with weeping, candles, and prayers steeped in hopelessness. But this was only the beginning, because in Tehran, far from the ruins, the Iranian generals remained silent, calm, and calculating. They knew Israel had been struck, but not yet defeated, and the greater storm might still be waiting on the horizon. Israel, a nation that for decades has stood firm amid the waves of Middle Eastern conflict, for the first time appeared shaken, fragile, and in disarray. Just hours after the deadly missile strike that killed 1,500 IDF soldiers, the atmosphere across the country changed drastically. Warning sirens wailed almost non-stop, piercing the skies of major cities. Tel Aviv, Haifa, Beersheba, even Jerusalem. The people panicked. Streets were filled with citizens running for shelter. Supermarkets were stormed. Train stations overflowed with thousands desperate to flee to the northern regions, believed to be safer. The Israeli government declared a national state of emergency. Reservists were called up. Houses of worship were transformed into shelters. Meanwhile, central government offices were shrouded in a haze of anxiety. Top officials gathered for an emergency session, but their faces betrayed shock and fear they could no longer hide. The Israeli Prime Minister, in a brief and pressured address, tried to calm the nation. "This is our darkest hour, but we will endure. Israel will never be defeated by terror. We promise that those who attacked us will pay a heavy price." But those words rang hollow for much of the population. They had seen it with their own eyes. 1,500 elite soldiers killed without resistance. A major military headquarters reduced to rubble. The defense system they once believed to be impenetrable collapsed in an instant. The shockwaves were felt not only in Israel but across the world. The United States swiftly condemned the attack but urged restraint. The European Union warned of the potential for a massive regional war. Gulf countries urged that the escalation not spill over into economic and energy sectors. The United Nations convened an emergency session, filled with tension and accusations. On social media, hashtags like #PrayForIsrael, #MiddleEastOnFire, and #WorldOnEdge trended globally. Millions of people around the world followed every second of the unfolding events, breath held, knowing that one diplomatic misstep could ignite the flames of a new world war. But beyond the political uproar, in the dark streets of Israel, the ordinary people understood one truth. They were alone, facing a terror they had never felt before. And in Tehran, Iran stood calm, warning that this was only the beginning. Should Israel dare to retaliate, a far greater hellfire would be unleashed. While Israel sank into chaos, Tehran stood in an unsettling calm. There were no victory parades, no cheering crowds in the streets. There was only silence, cold, deliberate, and calculating. Inside the control room of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, giant screens still displayed images of the devastation of Israel's headquarters. But the expressions of the generals remained blank. For them, this was not euphoria, not celebration. This was a message delivered to the entire world through blood and fire. Hours after the explosion that rocked Israel, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, appeared in a live national broadcast. With a calm voice and sharp gaze, he spoke only a few sentences, but his words shook the very core of global geopolitics. "We do not seek war, but we will never bow to oppression. This strike is a warning. If aggression continues, We will ignite a fire that even the great powers of the world will be unable to extinguish. The words were sharp, but spoken with a calm that was far more terrifying than a cry for war. Iran described the missile strike as a final defensive measure, not the beginning of a war. They made it clear that if Israel stopped, Iran would stop. But if Israel dared to retaliate, Iran was fully prepared, not only with missiles, but with proxy networks in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, capable of igniting war from every direction. In addition, Western intelligence sources reported that Iran's long-range ballistic missile units, including the Sejal and Khorramshahr systems, had been placed on full alert. This meant that in the event of escalation, Iran could strike far beyond Israel's borders, even targeting U.S. military bases across the Middle East. Meanwhile, on Iranian social media, the public showed silent solidarity. There were no parades, no celebrations. Instead, what was seen were mass prayers, flag raisings, and messages of patience. Iran chose to speak through action, not rhetoric. Tension reached its peak. Israel staggered, wounded. Iran stood unflinching. The world watched, and everyone knew a single bullet could become the spark for a much larger war. A war that could consume far more than just the Middle East. While smoke still billowed over Tel Aviv and sirens continued to wail, thousands of kilometers away in New York, the United Nations Security Council gathered for the most tense emergency session in the past 2 decades. Every seat was filled. Every diplomat's eyes were heavy with tension. Behind the thick glass of the Assembly Hall, the world held its breath. On one side, Israel's ambassador demanded condemnation and harsh punishment for Iran, calling the attack a state act of terrorism and an unprovoked assault on Israel's sovereignty. With a tense expression and a trembling voice, he declared, "Today it is Israel under attack. Tomorrow it could be anyone. Terrorism must be stopped before it's too late." On the other side, Iran's ambassador stood with a cold expression, unflinching under the sharp stares of world representatives. In calm but piercing words, he responded, "We did not start this. We merely responded with justice to Israel's blatant violation against our brothers and sisters in Gaza. If peace is what you seek, Israel must first stop its aggression." His statement cast a heavy silence over the room. The tension was so thick it could be felt in the air. Major powers like the United States, Russia, and China attempted to de-escalate the situation, but everyone knew words were no longer enough. Media outlets across the globe broadcast the session live. Millions watched with growing despair as no decisive outcome emerged. Pro-Israel and pro-Iran factions blocked each other's resolutions. The result? Total deadlock. Meanwhile, outside the halls of diplomacy, fear spread faster than anything else. Oil prices surged dramatically, sparking fears of a global energy crisis. Stock markets around the world trembled, from Tokyo to London. In numerous countries, thousands of demonstrators filled the streets, some in support of Palestine, others in support of Israel, and many simply calling out, "Stop the war." Analysts issued grave warnings. If Israel decides to retaliate, it won't just be Iran involved. Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Syria, and pro-Iranian forces in Iraq and Yemen could join the blaze of war. The Middle East could transform into a full-scale battlefield, and this time no one could predict who would survive. Peace was hanging by the thinnest of threads, and in the cold chambers of diplomacy, that thread was beginning to fray. Night slowly descended over the Middle East, but it wasn't calm that enveloped the region. It was a suffocating tension, thick in the air, almost tangible. The world now stood at the most dangerous crossroads in modern history. One wrong move, and a major war would be unavoidable. In Tel Aviv, the city lights remained on, but the streets were empty. People hid in their homes, in bunkers, in basements. Fear had turned into mass silence. No one knew if the sun would rise the next day without the flash of fire and the roar of explosions on the horizon. The Israeli government faced immense pressure. The generals demanded retaliation. Politicians warned of the dangers of escalation. The people were furious yet terrified. Behind closed doors, a monumental decision was being forged: strike back or hold back. Meanwhile, in Tehran, Iran remained calm but alert. The Revolutionary Guard had prepared additional missile systems, small warships in the Gulf were on standby, and proxy networks in Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen had been ordered to be combat-ready within hours, not days. Elsewhere in the world, global leaders weren't sleeping. From Washington, Beijing, and Moscow to Berlin, all eyes were anxiously fixed on the unfolding situation. Diplomatic communication channels stayed open day and night, yet distrust among the great powers made resolution nearly impossible. The tension had spread across continents. In Asia, financial markets were in turmoil. In Europe, NATO forces were on high alert. In Africa and Latin America, food and energy prices soared uncontrollably. Everyone, from ordinary citizens to world leaders, knew one undeniable truth. One retaliatory missile from Israel could ignite a regional war that would pull the world's major powers into the flames. Finally, in the dead of night, the Israeli Prime Minister appeared on national television. With a weary yet resolute face, he spoke. "We stand on the edge of the abyss. We have the right to retaliate, but we also bear responsibility for the future of our children. Israel will hold back, for now. But we will not forget, and we will not be weak." The decision was not without risk. In some streets of Tel Aviv, protests broke out. Online, heated comments exploded. But for now, the missiles remained silent. The world exhaled, waiting for the next chapter, because everyone knew this peace is fragile. The war is only postponed.